Continuing with Chapter 14, the Civil War, John Hunt Morgan. During this time, there were one of two sanctioned guerrilla Confederate outfits. Mr. Morgan was not born in Kentucky. He was actually born in Huntsville, Alabama. Moved to Kentucky when he was 6 years old. At the age of 17, he enrolled in Transylvania University. 2 years later, he would be suspended for dueling. Uh, John John Hunt Morgan had a very quick temper, but he would become an upstanding Lexington citizen. And when Kentucky declared for the North, he goes south. And he would also fight in the Battle of Shiloh. He would harass the military on the Union side and steal their supplies. Whoops, wrong button. So Morgan assures the Confederates that Kentucky is ripe for the taking. On July 4th, 1862, he decides to satisfy his desire uh, for large raids into Kentucky, and he's given an 876-man command. Uh, in 3 weeks, he captures 17 towns. Uh, Lots of supplies are destroyed. During this 3 week period, he also recruits 300 men, and he only loses 90. And so as a result, Morgan's reputation begins to spread. So Confederates believe that now's the time just to invade Kentucky. E. Kirby Smith and Braxton Bragg were given orders to head to Kentucky. On August 13th, 1862, Smith captures Cumberland Mountains. He and Bragg were supposed to advance into the Bluegrass together, but this doesn't happen. Bragg is left to fend for himself. There's no communication between the two men, and so the Union line collapses. There's a 75% loss. Lexington is captured on September 2nd, 1862. The next day, September 3rd, Frankfort is captured. Halls is conferred as the governor, and I've misspelled governor. Confederates, they now control the Cumberland Gap. And John Hunt Morgan, again, he's just sent to harass the Union troops. Bragg, he goes to help Smith, reinforcements. He was in Tennessee, but he finally leaves Chattanooga on August 28th. However, he wastes some time while he was in Sparta as he was traveling along, and then he had to spend 3 days at Munfordville. So at Munfordville, there's a vital railroad over Green River. There are approximately 4,000 Union troops who are stationed there to protect it. Um, so Colonel Dunham he sends word to Louisville that he wants reinforcements. His orders are to hold that bridge at all cost. General Chalmers, one of the Confederate leaders, he sent north, and his orders is not to take the bridge. That's not what they're going to focus on. However, he captures Chalmers, captures a telegraph operator at Cave City, and learns that the troops over the bridge were just young, raw green recruits. So he has this wild idea, and he sends a message to Dunham to surrender to prevent bloodshed. Dunham didn't believe Chalmers and didn't believe that he had tens of thousands of men behind him. And so he sends word back for a truce. So then General Bragg shows up. He's not happy, and so he just realizes that he has to fix the problem, as you just couldn't have tens of thousands of Confederate soldiers being held at bay by a few thousand young, green, raw Union troops. So General Buckner, he didn't know how to take the bridge. Buckner, he is from Munfordville, so he knows how to take the bridge. You just place men above the bridge, place the soldiers above the bridge, and you shoot down, and then you just surround the bridge with remaining soldiers. So he sends word to Dunham to surrender. So again, Dunham just still doesn't believe that all these men are there. Louisville is just getting upset with Dunham, so they want him to turn his command over to Colonel Wilder. Dunham still doesn't want to do this. He outranks Wilder. Wilder's just a lieutenant colonel. Dunham was older. He just didn't want to give up his command. So he gets word back to place himself under arrest and to turn himself in to Wilder, and so he would follow orders. Wilder didn't know what to do. He wasn't a military man, and he just could not believe that they would be able to take this many Confederate, that it would take this many Confederate soldiers to take a small group of men. So Wilder was told to surrender. He was also told to surrender to avoid further bloodshed. And in your textbook, Wilder's response was to avoid further bloodshed. If you want to avoid further bloodshed, keep out of the range of my guns. So when Wilder surrendered, he surrendered himself and more than 4,000 men. And so when you look in your text on pages 198 to 200, you can read some more information about Dunham, Wilder, Bragg, and Buckner, and Munfordville. Perryville Battle, the Battle of Chaplain Hills, sometimes referred to as the Battle of It is sometimes referred to as the Battle of Chaplain Hills. General Don Carlos Buell from the United States. He had 58,000 men, soldiers near Perryville, 20,000 stationed at Frankfurt. And so your text does do a good job at describing this battle. Frankfurt is retaken. October 7th, Buell heads for Perryville, and October 8th, 1862, the battle begins. So with the Perryville battle, pages 201, 202. General Bragg does realize, he finally realizes this, the size of the Union Army, so his orders are to retreat through the Cumberland Gap. The Confederate attempted invasion is over. The Battle of Perryville will be the state's bloodiest battle. For the Union loss, 845 dead, over 2,800 wounded, 515 missing. The Confederate loss, 510 dead, over 2,600 wounded, and 251 missing. Some reasons for loss. A drought. You just had to take the horses wherever the water was. There was just bad intelligence on both sides, untrained troops, generals, as I mentioned, generals not working together. For the Confederates, it was a tactical victory. For the Unions, however, it was an actual victory. It would bolster the Confederate bragging rights, but it would cost lives and vital supplies for the Confederates. So we will have Confederate raids for the next 2 to 3 years. John Hunt Morgan again, the Great Kentucky Raid, 1863. Just didn't follow orders. There would be a string of disasters. He takes his men to Ohio, and he would be captured July of 1863. He would escape prison, from prison. Probably had some inside help just to escape. Once hearing his escape, again, this bolsters his reputation even more. He is accused of robbing civilians, and so he's ordered to face a court of inquiry. And September 1863, he is surprised by General Burbridge, and he is killed. So just some other men. Adam Johnson of Henderson County. He's also known as Stovepipe Johnson. William Contrell, a notorious bandit. Sue Monday. Was not aware. No one knew if Sue was a man or a woman. They didn't know his identity or gender. But Sue Mundy had been Captain Jerome Clark. The words guerrilla war, they're Spanish words for small war. General Boyle believes that disloyal persons should pay for damages by the opposite side. And Governor T.E. Bramlett, rebel sympathizers, hostage, 5 rebel sympathizers hostage for each loyal citizen carried off. So on these gentlemen here on page 205 in your text, you can read some additional information about them. And so with with Governor Bramlett, he ordered 5 rebel sympathizers to be held hostage for each loyal citizen carried off by guerrillas. And so that summer, General Burbridge ordered 4 guerrilla prisoners shot for each Union man who was killed. And this is just known as the infamous Order 59. In October 1864, Burbridge ordered that hereafter no guerrillas will be received as prisoners. Guerrilla warfare would be one of the worst aspects of the war in Kentucky. Many civilians would suffer at the hands of the guerrillas and from the illegal methods used to combat them. So just some problems that the Union commanders had, again, just with these Confederate invasions. The guerrillas are attacking who actually was loyal to the Union. Confederate Union, they could have been guerrillas, part of the guerrilla warfare, so you just didn't know who was loyal. Also, bushwhackers, someone who just shoots someone else in the back. The Kentucky problems with the Union commanders. Union commanders used illegal and unconstitutional means for control. Oftentimes, innocent civilians were punished. Loyalty oaths were required. Some ministers were arrested or sent north. There would be some rebel females who would be arrested, and they would be forced to sew Union uniforms. The press would be censored. In 1863, martial law would be declared in Kentucky. So General Thomas Bramlett is elected governor. He is opposed to the enlistment of black soldiers. He also suspends the writ of habeas corpus. Then a man by the name of General Payne, his 7 weeks of terror, he would raise money for families who lost relatives in the war and or supplies. However, the money was not delivered to them. There was a 24% tax on cotton. Yes, 24% tax. This money was not sent to the government. People would just be executed on his order. There would be no trial. Ordered the useless fort in Mayfield. Whether you were young, old, sick, you either had to work or pay $300, of which, once you paid, he kept the money. And after his 7 weeks of terror, he would leave and he went to Illinois. So his punishment was he just received a reprimand. And on page 206, 207, just some additional information. about General Bramlett. So I'm going. This will conclude part 2 of chapter 14. So there was a lot of information in chapter 14. I know in the syllabus it states this week chapter 14, 15, but I'm just going to cover chapter 14 only. So just make sure that you complete the 2 assignments for this week.